Welcome to our one-on-one discussion with the major candidates to be the next mayor of Boston. My name is Jim Rooney. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is the region's leading business voice, representing 1,300 businesses who collectively employ hundreds of thousands of people in and around Boston. Candidates are participating in many forums around the city, and in this conversation, we want to focus on the issues that are priorities for the business community of Boston and the big and small employers who drive economic success by creating and sustaining jobs. For many years now, Boston has enjoyed tremendous growth. The city attracts young talent, incubates life-changing innovations, and supports new development. We punch above our weight, so to speak, accounting for 2.2% of national GDP, even though we have just 1.5% of the national population. The next mayor has a challenge of growing and maintaining this success in a changed world. We've seen in the last year that the city's economic vibrancy and success is fragile, and across the US, both businesses and people are relocating. Oftentimes, relocations are driven by the costs of living and working, regulation, taxation, issues of public safety, and failures of local and state governments to meet the needs of its key industries and businesses. The risks are acute for Boston because we rely mightily on talent and employers that are mobile. In our next mayor, the business community seeks a partner who is willing to work side by side to compete in the global and mobile economy. Today's discussion is one way to learn how candidates will do that. The candidates also completed in a questionnaire we developed, and responses are posted on our website. The candidate field will be narrowed to 2 finalists in a citywide election on Tuesday, September 14th. The Chamber hopes all Bostonians will engage in this selection by learning about the candidates and exercising their right and privilege to vote on Election Day. Our purpose at the Greater Boston Chamber is to make Boston the best place for all businesses and all people to succeed. Let's have a conversation about how we can do that together. I'm pleased to introduce current Mayor Kim Janey. Kim Janey is the 55th mayor of Boston. She was sworn in as the first woman and the first Black mayor in the city's history on March 24th, 2021. A proud 4th-generation Roxbury resident, Mayor Janey comes from a long line of educators, entrepreneurs, artists, and advocates. Mayor Janey, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to begin by thanking you, your entire team, including your board. And I want to also thank you for being a great thought leader in our city and a partner in this work. It was instrumental having you as part of the Mayoral Transition Committee, and I'm just grateful for the work that you do every single day in the city of Boston.
Thank you, Mayor, for those kind words. And there's a lot we want to cover today. So we'll ask you to keep your answers succinct, and let's get started with some questions. You've been mayor since March, as I said. Why are you running for mayor?
You know, I am born and raised in this city. I come from a long line of educators, artists, entrepreneurs, and advocates who taught me early on the importance of public service, of caring deeply for my city. As someone who has been a strong advocate for small business, you know, I understand where we are in our city's history. As the first woman mayor, as the first Black mayor, we have a unique opportunity, given COVID-19 and the devastating impact that has had on businesses. We have the opportunity now to not try to go back to a normal where many folks were left out, but to create a stronger Boston, an economy that is robust with shared prosperity. That is the work that I've done over the last 4 months as mayor, and that is the work that I certainly hope to continue over the next 4 years. For me, this is about how we go better in our city, and Boston is right to do so.
The mayor's always working.
That was a good save by the bell, so kept that answer nice and short for you.
I want to follow up in some ways on the theme of that answer by shifting to one of the biggest challenges facing the new mayor, which is tackling equity and economic inclusion. Issues of racism, inequality, and the gaps in our society have appropriately been elevated in our public discourse. And you talk about, the things that you'd like to do as mayor, but what's the business community's role in creating a more equitable Boston?
Oh, the business community has a big role to play. Certainly city government, all of us have a responsibility. As you know, as all your listeners know, we have a racial wealth gap in the city of Boston that is nearly $250,000. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that we are being very, very intentional when it comes to opportunity, when it comes to access, when it comes to inclusion in our city. And I have put some measures in place from city government perspective as mayor of Boston on how we can lead and do that work. And I've encouraged for the business community to join in that effort. That means everything from supplier diversity and who you do business with and how, not you specifically, Jim, but businesses throughout the city of Boston can take this as an opportunity to develop pipelines that bring more people of color in, more women in, certainly on boards and in positions of leadership, but also who you do business with as corporations. And so we all have a role to play and certainly want to continue to do that work in partnership with you and others on this call.
I want to move on to real estate development, which is at times controversial, but an important part of our growth. What's your view of the city's development review process? Does it need to be streamlined? And we've heard that word used. What does that mean to be streamlined?
Well, we do need to remove barriers and make doing business with the city easier without cutting corners. So it is important that we do our due diligence, but there is an opportunity in my administration, my team is working on some streamlined approaches, whether we're talking about outdoor dining, whether we're talking about real estate development. Again, important to make sure that we do our due diligence. And so that is definitely something that we are working on.
Okay. Sticking with development.
In terms of development, though, you asked about the process. I do think we also have a responsibility to focus much more on planning. Maybe that is where your next question is going. I don't know.
Well, a little bit. I wanted to stick with development, but maybe it will lend itself to a planning discussion because the Seaport District in particular has been criticized by all the candidates and others. What do you think went wrong with the way the development unfolded in the Seaport? What would you have done differently, or will you do differently going forward?
I think, again, that was a lack of intentionality, of being very intentional around inclusion and opportunity and equity. For me, I bring an equity lens to everything that I do. It is in part based on my lived experience, personal and professional. And so I think in all development, not just in the Seaport and any neighborhood, we have an opportunity to do things differently. There is a beacon of hope there in the Omni Hotel. And I think that can serve as a model for how we do development all across our city. And it really does need to be intentional in terms of a focus on equity.
Okay. So let's talk about education. The business community cares deeply about education because today's students are tomorrow's workforce. During the pandemic, the poor condition of the schools in Boston was highlighted and is in need of significant capital investment. Before spending hundreds of millions of dollars that maybe we don't even have to spend, do we have too many school buildings? As mayor, would you address the results of a 2015 audit that revealed that BPS should consolidate schools?
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, my predecessor questioned the validity of that audit. And for me, as someone who is born into a family of educators and spent the majority of my career in education advocacy, I would argue that the focus needs to be on the quality of education and the instruction. We can talk about buildings, and certainly our buildings need some TLC and some investment. And I think COVID underscored that when we're talking about air quality and the need, and as well as climate change. Our buildings are always extremely hot or too cold. And so I think our buildings certainly need some attention, but the real issue for me is the quality of instruction and making sure that we are supporting our educators, supporting our families, and most important, supporting our students.
Mhm. Mayor, in my opening remarks, I noted that some relocation occurs because of public safety. Um, Movements to defund the police have swept across America. What does that phrase mean to you? And in next year's budget, would you see cutting funding in the Boston Police Department in 2023?
I think there is a big push to reimagine policing all across our nation. And for me, I am just later on today, this afternoon, and hope you will tune in. We are announcing a pilot on how to do just that, beginning with the response to crises, particularly mental health response. And so, we can free up police officers to focus on what is important, and that is violent crime. When it comes to a public health issue like a mental health an episode or challenge, I would rather see mental health professionals respond to that call. And so I think there are a number of people all across the city of Boston, as well as our country, who see this as an opportunity to reimagine police, to make sure that resources are going where they are most needed. And when it comes to public health, we need a public health response. When it comes to violent crime, we need a public safety response.
Okay.
And there is so much more. I know we're very limited on our responses, but there's so much more that goes into that. There's racial equity training. There is making sure that we're dealing with accountability and transparency. All of those things are underway and are priorities for me in my administration.
Okay, I want to return to the subject of talent. From a business community perspective, it's our competitive advantage. So it'll be top of mind for any mayor. How can we do a better job as a city attracting and retaining talented people?
We have to continue to make sure that Boston is a city where folks want to come into. The other thing is we've got people already in our city, and we also have a responsibility to make sure that there are opportunities for them. And so making sure that there are pipelines and pathways for our young people, particularly our high school students, as well as more partnerships with our universities and colleges. Boston is a great city. It's a world-class city. A lot of folks want to call Boston home, which is a great thing. And we have to continue doing what makes Boston work, but ensure that it works for everyone.
I want to follow up on that theme of pipeline and pathways for students. Chamber, as you know, is a strong advocate for Madison Park High School and vocational education in general. I know you know a lot about this subject. How will you, or how can we together create a world-class career and vocational technical education offerings in Boston?
Yeah, so I'm sure, as you know, Jim, have been a big advocate of Madison Park and how we strengthen and build additional relationships there. I would say, number one, there are some good things happening at Madison. Under the leadership of Kevin McCaskill, he has been able to really strengthen some of those partnerships with labor organizations and making sure that our young people have great opportunities. They have an amazing culinary arts program. They have a strong cosmetology program, and there's certainly great partnerships with the trade unions. But we can do more and better to make sure that this is truly a world-class education for our students. And I think strengthening those relationships and that those partnerships will help us get there. There's also new leadership coming in and want to make sure that we are supporting a new headmaster. The old headmaster left, and we need to make sure Kevin will still play a critical role in overseeing this work from a central office perspective. But we have more work to do. Part of that may involve, looking at the admissions policy. And I think a big part of it has to be on how we fund Madison as well.
So I want to shift back to the economy of Boston and touch on the higher education community and hospitals, the so-called eds and meds, critical elements of our economy. We enjoy the presence of so many world-class institutions of learning and hospitals credited with driving some of the economic success of the region and industries like biotech and creating thousands of jobs. Yet for decades, elected official and sometimes candidates have suggested these institutions don't contribute enough as measured by just pilot payments. How do you think about the importance of eds and meds in our cities and the whole issue of pilot payments?
Well, we have the best universities, I would argue, not just in our country, but we have universities that attract students from all over the world. The same is true of our hospitals. There's no question of, that we have great institutions here in Boston. But there is a question, and I think the answer is clear as to whether they are paying, their fair share. With universities, I think the difference is much more stark. And what I have done, certainly in my career as an elected official, certainly when I was on the other side of City Hall, a big, strong advocate in this space, and as mayor of Boston, have taken steps to look at this. We have convened a task force, a working group, to particularly start with looking at community benefits. And how is that aligned with the city's priorities? How is that aligned with the vision and where we want to go? I think these institutions have, great community benefits when you look at them. Always great to support different things in the community, but the question is it aligned? And then is it truly benefiting that community where that institution is? And who gets a say in that? And so we are working with advocates. We are working with our meds and our eds around how we get better alignment and incorporate the voice of the community in the benefits process. And that work has already started, and we, announced that a while ago, and, want to see that be the starting point. And then obviously, we would love to see more investment. Our tax base here in Boston, as we know, our budget, which is $3.76 billion, 3/4 of which is on property tax. And if that is falling to homeowners and people who own property and not those who are exempt, that is a large burden to carry. And we really do need to diversify our revenue stream. Pilot payments is one way, but we also have to look at other ways to diversify our revenue stream because it's not sustainable.
Great, Mayor. Our 20 minutes has gone by way too quickly. I've enjoyed this conversation. What's your closing message to the business community of Boston? What can business leaders expect going forward from a Janey administration?
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity again to be with you this morning. I am a big believer in supporting business, particularly small business, businesses that create opportunities and jobs for our young people. We saw the way business, stood up and answered the call when it came to summer jobs for our young people, even this year. while we continue to battle COVID. And I know how difficult it has been over the last 17 months, particularly for businesses. For example, I just yesterday did a ribbon cutting that was a reopening, not a grand opening, but a reopening, a business that had been open for 10 years and had great success downtown in the financial district, that had to close its doors for 17 months. But yesterday it was able to reopen. And we know restaurants are part of the hospitality industry, one of the hardest hit here in the city of Boston. It's our third largest industry. What you can all expect from me is a partner in this work, a champion for business as being a vital part to our economy, and a willing partner and a leader in the space when it comes to equity and inclusion, and helping us all get to a place where there is shared prosperity. Boston works best when it works for everyone. And we have an opportunity here to tackle our racial wealth gap, to make sure as we continue to battle COVID and come out of the pandemic, that we are creating a stronger Boston for all. And I look forward to doing that work with all of you. And again, I thank you for your partnership and your leadership already, and hope to continue that work with you into the future. Thank you so much again for the opportunity, Jim, and all the best.
Thank you, Mayor Janey, for your time today and for today's discussion and your leadership of the city over the last 4 or 5 months. And we look forward to working with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.